Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Naveen Agarwal. This video is a recording of an interactive Q&A session we just had very recently on the topic of risk management for medical devices. Now, risk management continues to be a challenging topic, even for those of us who have been in the industry for many years. So the intent behind these interactive Q&As is to engage in a conversation, in a dialogue. And sure enough, we had a very engaging conversation about certain topics related to risk management. And this is not going to be the only Q&A session. We will have more in the future. So you can watch the entire video at leisure. It's about an hour long. Or you can follow the time-stamped links as part of this video to scroll forward to a question of interest. So I want to invite you to take a look at it, and I hope you will enjoy and learn something new. If there are more questions, please let me know, and I look forward to meeting you again on our future interactive Q&As. With that, what I wanted to do, I did not get any pre-submitted questions. We will have a discussion, but what I thought of doing with you today is to start our conversation with a recent case study, recent warning letter that I came across. So can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so hang on.
Yes.
So what I would like to do is start with that, and let me just quickly change a few settings here. It's taking up a lot of my screen. Okay, so this is I won't name names. You guys can go and find out the warning letter. It's on FDA's website, but that's not the point. The point is what they cited and why it relates to how it relates to post-market surveillance. So it's a 510(k) exempt medical device letter was issued in May. This is how they cite. Your firm has not conducted design validation on your, I blanked it out, device as required by 21. So they are citing against design validation because that's where the requirement appears. But here's what's interesting. So the risk management procedure, SOP, whatever, dated February 12, 2021, requires previously unrecognized risk to be input into the risk management process. Great, right? We want to see this. That's perfect. The SOP is great. But look what's happening. Since October 2019, your firm has received 13 complaints for some kind of failures that have resulted in corrective and preventive actions being initiated. However, this failure mode is not identified in your design FMEA risk document references given, dated October 1, 2019, which was reviewed by your firm on February 16, 2021. So they're careful, right? They're citing the review after the SOP was put in place, but they're pointing to a deficiency that, yes, complaints came in, CAPA was being initiated, but it was not reflected in the risk document. So I thought that this was really quite interesting, and I wanted to bring this to our forum and invite some conversation, because I think key part of risk management is to bring it all the way back to the design and development process and recognize risk and improve continuously. How do you guys feel about it? Do you see this happen? So a couple of questions to talk about. Is this a common challenge, common problem in our experience? And how do we best address this? What systems and what best practices can we share? So I would it's an open forum, and Jay, you have your hand on. So yes, I will definitely invite you. Please go ahead, and whoever wants to pitch in, it is going to be a very free flow conversation, but we will still have time for your individual questions that you wanted to talk about. So I open the floor.
Yeah, so I mean, the comment I had was I have seen FDA inspectors focus on this a lot. And in their words, they say, if you have a failure mode from complaints, which is not in your risk management document, they say that, and these are the inspector's word, it is unassessed, unmitigated risk to the public. So, and then you are liable for that. So that's their thought process in that. Even though if it's just one occurrence, or if it's a new failure mode, and it can have potential levels of severity. So sure. As the manufacturers, it's your liability to go ahead and feed that back into the process.
Yeah, and
So
it makes sense, right? That's what ISO 14971 also requires. We got to make it work so that it works for the business and the patient and the regulatory authorities in a continual way, right? So this is I really pay attention to warning letters, but this is the first time I found a specific citation linking post-market surveillance to the design and development process through risk management. I have not seen too many, but I would really love to hear your perspective, guys. What have you seen in your experience, and is this a common problem?
So I've seen this a lot, but I think everything is potentially foreseeable when you're developing the file until it happens. And then once it happens, then those are part of your foreseeable known risks, right? So you start your files with some mix of potentially foreseeable misuse and potential risks as well as any known risks. So if you have similar products or just a line extension, you might have known risks that you start with, and in that subset. But then once it happens post-market, you have to find a way to connect it back. And I think that's one of the biggest gaps I've seen in many companies that I've been part of, that the mechanism to bring it back, sometimes it's not there. It's also challenging to maintain that. And you have to, a lot of times it comes to resourcing too, adequate resourcing. And that's constantly a challenge too, that you don't have enough that, maintain and manage that file and triage the complaint so that it gets into the next stage of either an NC or some vehicle that's going to point to the risk management file and say, hey, you need to update this.
Yeah, the resourcing is a challenge. Great, thanks for pointing that out. We are doing a lot of things. Go ahead, Vijay.
I don't think inadequate resources is a valid excuse.
No, definitely not.
I would not accept that. I think what
definitely not.
Yeah, I think any company that uses as an excuse, if I were an auditor, I would reject that. The problem is inappropriate QMSs. They don't have proper mechanisms of capturing and prioritizing. Yes, everybody has limited resources, but if you don't have a good system of capturing these events, then they fall through the cracks like this in this warning letter.
Yeah.
The requirements in 13485 and also in the preamble for 21 CFR 820 require you to apply based upon risk the resources that you have to the situations you're in. For instance, we're talking about post-market, so we need to apply our resources depending upon the risk of the device. So if we've got a class 3 device, we are obligated to apply sufficient resources to make sure that device is as safe and effective as we can, which means monitoring and feedback needs to be more stringent for that device, perhaps than a class 1, something that is a single-use device. So the regulatory answer applies to all of this. It depends. That's the correct answer.
Well, I would say in this case, they wrote that pretty clearly in the procedure, right? It just fell through the cracks. So actually, what I want to hear and sort of we pointed to this: resources is a concern. How alignment of those resources, prioritization of those resources, and how we escalate over time where we are falling behind. Is it a procedural issue or is it a system issue? What is it? So I think practically, that's where I want us to kind of focus a little bit more on, is that practically what's happening in our organizations. We are overwhelmed, right? With a lot of information, a lot of challenges, a lot of complaints, a lot of priorities. How do we keep track of all this? And on top of it, the requirements are getting stronger, not less stringent, more stringent. So we have to figure out a way. So I'm really personally very interested in execution. I'm very interested in learning about requirements, but at the same time, I'm also interested in execution and helping people learn how to execute it effectively, right? That's what we want. So I would like us to kind of focus a little bit more. Let's dig a little bit more why this might be happening in our organizations or what we have seen. how we have overcome some of these. I'm sure everybody is struggling with this, right? So I
Naveen,
still
from an execution standpoint, there's various, so resources will always be a constraint. It goes back to the maturity of the process to pick on things like that. And I think Bijan pointed that out about maturity of your QMS, right? So there's, on a practical level, there's various ways, there's various processes where you can link back your complaints to risk management. The most ideal way would be you do a risk analysis on every complaint which comes in, you check your severity, occurrence, risk level, and if there's not a failure mode there, a flag goes up directly to the risk management team. Now, this is the most resource intensive process because you're investigating, not only investigating each complaint, you are doing risk analysis on every complaint and you're setting up that interface with the risk management, right? Not every company does that. Some companies, like FDA, doesn't even want you to investigate everything. That's what the reg says. You don't have to. You know, you can just triage things, or you can bundle things, or point to a previous investigation. So then from there, it starts getting leaner and leaner, and then you have to figure out like what works best with the resources and the maturity of QMS you have. Like I've seen some companies which only rely on like statistical measures to see, occurrence rates going up and down. And based on that, only then they will communicate, because they will take any excursion very seriously. And it's just, sometimes it becomes a paperwork exercise to just add a line item. But in this particular case, I like this because they're connecting it to validation. So they're saying as part of their mitigations, right? It's a very deep warning.
I think part of it is because that's the only way they can cite. I mean, they are doing an inspections, but I think you make a very good, valid point, Jay. What I want to also again push back a little bit on is how are we doing? What are we doing in our organizations? So really, I'm looking at folks who are doing this day in and out every day. How are we managing this? And what problems do we face? How do we resolve them? What best practices can we share?
I think trending is key. Definitely what Jay was saying. When you have a single incident, it shouldn't necessarily always have to trigger an update of the risk management file, but maybe a deeper investigation to see, what else are underlying issues with that. But I think trending is key in terms of how you manage, when you go in and update your risk management file. And then also risk levels play a critical role. So if you triage things so that if it's a higher risk level, higher severity occurrence, and it goes right into an escalation process. So like, saying S1 through S5 and you're at an S4, S5 level and maybe a high occurrence, that would go straight to the path of, maybe your HHE pathway to evaluate whether you need to take further steps. But if it's a low risk, then you might want to just log it and manage and maintain it so that when you have enough of those low risk and you're making a routine update or something, and that might be a way to manage, so you're not constantly updating.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you say sort of clear rules, clear decision-making process.
Correct.
So that people are not confused. They know what to do, right? So that's good. That's good best practice. However you do it, whatever you use statistics or whatever you do it, but have some clear decision-making criteria.
Right.
And continue to refine them, because of course we will learn more. Great point. Thank you for bringing this up.
And I was on the team, the sub-team that wrote Clause 10 and 14971. So some of the considerations we expected people to make is not just upon the the risk of the product, but also what is the current state of knowledge? In other words, if we've got a brand new product that we're putting out on the market, we expect that you're going to monitor more closely to that product than something that's been out there for a long time, regardless of the risk level. So certainly the risk level is important in setting the stage, but also how much do you really know about the product? Because everything you've done up until release is guess. It is what we technically call estimates, but it's really guesses based upon what level of knowledge we have. And it's pretty sketchy in a brand new product that's never been on the market before, as opposed to a product which is a follow-on, or an upgrade to a previous version. In that case, we have a lot more knowledge and we have a lot more confidence in the data. In fact, I was just responding to a REPS question that's been running for a little while on probability of occurrence of harm. And what I pointed out there was that probability estimates can be quantitative or qualitative. And they should be qualitative up until the point where you have confidence in the data that tells you what that probability is. According to the statistical requirements or statistical techniques requirements in both the regulation and the 13485 standards. So it depends on how much you know and the quality of that data before you change your monitoring interval. And, you focus on those high risk things, you focus on things you don't know as much about. And we're kind of like drugs. When we are going through the phases of development and testing, like design validation, we gain a little bit of knowledge, but because we only expose it to a small segment of the patient population that's going to use the device, we don't know as much. So when we release it to the general population, that's when we start getting better data. Yep. And then we can start working on estimates. But the warning letter you pointed back to, and I remember reading that one when it first came out, was, hey, they just screwed up and didn't follow their own process. Right. That's what the FDA investigator was citing them for. But your post-market processes now, and 14971 and 13485 were both developed based upon the GHTF Kappa guidance document. Yeah. That's where those came from. And then we also included Europe's post-market surveillance requirements, and now the FDA has post-market surveillance requirements. So all of those requirements were inputs into the development of this process.
So I think hearing you describe this, Ed, this thought is coming to my mind, and I have done that in my past experience, and I will kind of share this with you and seek your feedback. Now there is a requirement in EU MDR about post-market surveillance plans, right? So yes, would that be a good place? Would that be a good place to put all this kind of instruction, product-specific instruction based on maturity level, state of art, and then have a transition plan as the product matures over time? Would that work?
Actually, your risk management plan is required to cover that. So as you develop your device, you develop a risk management plan to steer you through all those stages. And it includes post-market in that plan. So you may not know early in the design process exactly what that's going to take on because of the device development path and everything. So you want to update.
Yeah, but just to make sure it happens, would it be a good idea to have a deliverable mention in the risk management plan that at point of commercialization, you go out with a post-market surveillance plan specifically for this product?
So the plans are based on classifications also. That's what the EUMDR says. But we have to understand that, so the plan will result in a report, right? Could be a PSUR or PMSR, depending on the classification. And that report, and the whole point of that report is your benefit risk analysis still valid? Right. So that does connect it back to the RMP. So I think it's a great idea, and it has to be there, because I would like to underline Ed's point that up till you release the product, it's all guesswork. And the plan is collecting what kind of information? That's real world evidence, right? What FDA calls. So that has to feed back, and plan can be a great tool, or the report feeding back to your, so PMSP and RMP and PSUR, and then RMP, right?
Sure. So let me do a reality check, guys. We are all kind of consultants and all kind of giving advice and all. How does this sound to people who are actually working in the industry and handling this day in and out? How about, would that idea work, or do you have some other best practices that you can share with the folks?
I can share, Naveen, somehow, because we just finished first round of our MDR audits.
Okay.
With DECRA, UMDR. So it really works. And as Jet said, this was the best thing I included in RMPs last year is for sure the PMS plans, because that's the kind of thing you should do. And just one maybe small input that when you're doing it we did for a new product in the market, so make it more frequently, because usually people set the frequencies of PMS plans or reports yearly or once in 2 years. So my small input will be when it's a new, especially the new product which is not in the market, kind of innovative or half innovative, put this frequency to quarterly or 6 monthly. So that's what we did, that in 6 months we will collect, first 6 months of release we will collect whatever it is, and we will see if we have more any other risk based on the first feedback from customers which we have not foreseen or something.
So
and it's
Shalu,
very important
just to make
link
sure that
these
it
things.
happens, did you also put that in a procedure somewhere?
Yes, in SOPs. So SOP risk management and SOP post-market surveillance both
Perfect.
have the link, and it has to be in both SOPs.
Perfect.
But then it's again responsibility of your team to follow SOPs. So you have to make sure,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
putting it in SOPs, in my experience, works really very well. And you have your QMS audits and you pass those audits, no findings. Wonderful. That is what is my real life experience. It is all well. But when you submit tech doc and it's reviewed, so your developments or whoever created documents somehow miss implementing what is in SOPs.
Yeah.
So that's my real life experience. We all need somehow a mechanism that SOPs are really followed.
Yes,
really,
for sure.
so.
Well, yeah, that's really.
Because it happened with us to be very true. QMS audit, one minor finding. Wonderful. You are 13485 under MDR qualified. The moment the tech doc reviews came back, so they found lots of things in PMS which were not properly done. And then because PMS SOP itself was not properly followed.
Okay.
So once the risk management team took the input from PMS, they didn't include things which were missing.
Okay.
So for me, I guess most of the learning, and we all have to make sure that these two teams really coordinate well and cross-check or cross-review each other's work or each other's documents. Because in my experience, in my last company, it happened, people most of the times get offended. How we did our reports fine. Risk team is unnecessarily pointing it out.
Yes. So there's a
and
team.
The other way around. So I guess first effort should be to let both teams, and especially then the clinical team now under EU MDR, all these three people should really review each other's work in a very critical and friendly manner, not offensive matter.
I think you are bringing another important point, that post-market surveillance process is a cross-functional process.
It is.
It's
really
not just like risk management or complaints handling group.
No, even risk management, because we did today, just for example, in the morning, we did a review of one big RMR which we're remediating and we have to submit it. So it's really bad idea not to include clinical and PMS people when you are doing these RMR reports or mitigations, and not to include, because in my experience in last company, people did not include developers when they were finalizing these documents.
Right. So
and that's where this warning letter comes, because if you really include all the time development people and not think that now it's a high level document, developers are not required anymore.
Right.
You miss out on the tests. Maybe they have performed, or maybe they have a better clue to your mitigations rather than clinical or PMS team.
Yeah, so I think in real terms, we are also talking about how the team is structured, how the cross-functional
that is what I want to highlight, because mostly I have seen in my experience there is a disconnect.
Well, so if you
all of them do their own work, but they don't really sit together and link. When you submit your individual documents, and inspector reviews them all together.
So then I'm going to ask this question. It is actually kind of the intent behind all the requirements, as I understand and read them, is they will be cross-functional, right?
Yep.
There's no way one person can do it. So that's the intent. The procedures that we write, we define roles and responsibilities. We identify team members. We do everything right on paper.
Yep. Everything SOP is perfect. SOP is perfect all the time.
So when we go to execute, something falls apart. And I'm just trying to get to that. And again, every situation is different. Every organization is different. I'm
no,
not
but I
here
guess we
to
need
say,
some efforts to have this, means rather than, means this is also one point that we need to make an effort so that people really work together and don't miss out on things.
so are we, Shalu, then are we saying, and again, I'm thinking out loud here, are we saying that it's also kind of work culture, work environment type of a point
I
that
guess
you
maybe
have to make sure
because it
everyone
depends.
collaboration happens, right?
Yeah. So
It's
we
not
have
like
to maybe,
it's not like a ping pong game where you say,
no.
I've done my design, now it's your job.
Yeah,
Or
no.
complaints, people say, I'm getting a lot of complaints, go fix it, right? So I think we have to kind of really think about how things get done in our organizations through a collaborative environment. So it's more than, now you will not find this terminology in standards or requirements, but without that, you cannot make this work, right? That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And it's
Okay,
also
Bijan,
behavior.
you have a comment or question, Bijan? I will.
Yeah, I do. So Shalu mentioned that people were not following the SOP. When you do your risk management review, one of the claims that you make is that you followed your process. So was that a false claim, or was it, how could it be that you say we followed it but you didn't?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I have seen. I gave you an example. Real life example was that where people did a proper job of taking over all the complaints severity or something into the risk management report, because PMS report clearly said we had support 30 or 31 of these complaints, and out of that 4 were design complaints and 13 or 28 were user handling. So okay, fine, when you do risk assessment, maybe you're not really worried about if user handling, but you still have to include it in some way. So that's one example, because what people mostly do, this is user handling, it's not serious, we don't do anything about it. But then according to your SOP, you are fine. But then also when it was reviewed, no, if it is user handling, and if so many users make this mistake, you have to really think where you mitigate it. It's not your design, it's not your material, it's not even the misuse. It's just the normal use, but people do this. But this means it's just one example, Bijan, I had, and we had really tough time because the team there really did not, for 2 or 3 years continuously, did not consider into the risk management user handling complaints. So these kind of examples, so maybe we need somehow, we all learning, getting better. So
so it's also learning, right? You are saying learning process. And
learning
learning
process,
is not just
I
training.
guess, is all the
I don't
time
think learning
on.
is just training, right? You cannot say we have done a class or you have done a course and we now know it. Learning also involves actually doing it, right? So absolutely, Shalu, you were right about learning. Great discussion, guys. This is exactly how I was intending to have this conversation, more real world, more like practical execution. So certainly we can continue to talk about this case, but I want to make sure we save some time for folks who might have some specific questions that they are thinking about and they would like some feedback. Saurabh, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yeah, one other thing I was going to say was, training is key. I think having systems in place. So, if you have a PLM system or some kind of ERP that helps manage this along the way, and at least brings people together in terms of review and approval process, that could also help facilitate. So if we're talking about how do we avoid this in our system and having the right QMS setup, that the QMS is structured around these systems so that it's integrated and people know what to do, when to follow, and make sure we're not missing things. So that could be another key to, making sure that this kind of events don't occur.
Great. Good point. Thank you.
And also, let me jump in there for a moment.
Yes, go ahead,
13485 has a clause in clause 8 on improvement. So as we learn, as we go along, and something that wasn't in the system, it's something new, that we need to change the quality management system, that's expected of you. So you need to have a process for monitoring the sufficiency of your quality management system and then updating it based upon that. And part of that is the competence of the people doing the process. So if we go back to risk management, there's a requirement in 14971 to have competent personnel doing the steps. So that means, for instance, that the clinical people can't make decisions upon component failure any more than the engineers can make decisions about the clinical use of the device. So we've got to have the right people on our team, and it needs to be, as has been pointed out here through this discussion, it needs to be a teamwork activity. We have to work together and share the knowledge that we have. We all have inputs into these decisions. So it's important that it not be done in silos. And that's one of the aspects of quality systems that has evolved over time, is that we originally had these different silos of people who would do work, and then we all know about the throwing the design over the wall to manufacturing and they make it, you know. So today it's a seamless activity. We all work together as a team. The design team needs to include the clinicians, the manufacturing personnel, service personnel for those devices that are serviceable, the complaint people. What do they need to prepare for on receiving complaints coming in, and the regulatory folks on reporting vigilance? You know, what do they need to expect coming at them? So we all need to work together as teams to make this happen.
So really, it goes beyond SOP, right? The practice.
Yes.
The practice of risk management involves a lot of other skills, leadership skills, facilitation skills, project management skills. You know, you have to work on a budget. You have to work with other constraints. So yeah, I know a lot of good discussion, guys. Again, any other specific question in any other part of your process, QMS, risk management, anybody wanted to bring a question to this forum? I know we didn't get a chance to submit them, but please bring them up if you have any specific question in mind right now.
So I did have one question on something that Ed said earlier. You know, we talk about the risk management plan, and then the last part of the risk management plan where you talk about production, post-production. In terms of, at least what I've seen is that you reference your post-market surveillance and your CAPA or those types of systems that you have in place. And then additionally, you can also specify, you know, how frequent you might review it periodically. But beyond that, is there anything more that you would write out in your plan for the product?
Let me go back to the periodic statement. That's probably not the best way to specify how often we're going to do things. It's more likely that a brand new device is going to be monitored more frequently than once a year or once every 6 months. So again, it's a regulatory answer. It depends. So it depends on the device. It depends on the risk. It depends on the knowledge that we have, lots of things on establishing this. So we need to be flexible in establishing the monitoring part of it. Now, certainly the plan, there's a regulatory requirement for submitting a plan once a year on post-market surveillance or whatever it is. But the monitoring needs to be more frequent so that we know what's going on with the product on a continuous basis. In fact, in 14971, we expect an active process. That is, you are going out and seeking data. You are looking at publicly available information on the web. You are looking at FDA's total product lifecycle database. And hopefully someday we'll be able to look at the European databases as well, although I just read a...
when? We don't know when.
Maybe, hopefully September.
So sort of...
but right now you can go to some of the competent authorities databases, the individual countries in Europe, and find information. Some of those databases are available. So there are ways of getting there. It's just not as easy as going to that single UNIMED database.
Right. So
Right.
Saurabh, thank you, Ed, for explaining that so very well. Saurabh, I'll share with you my experience. I would say what I have found to work better is have an additional post-market surveillance plan, product specific, which is the context of the risk management plan. So risk management plan has many other things, right? Not just production, post-production. So what I have found to work better in my situations is have a dedicated post-market surveillance plan for the product in question, describing not only the frequency, data sources, how the analysis will be performed, because not all statistical techniques may be appropriate for that product. So I would say that the level of detail you can include in a dedicated post-market surveillance plan, and you can reference that in the RMP for sure.
Mhm.
But what I've seen work really well is where we sit down and put together a dedicated post-market surveillance plan with a, we should include criteria for transition, because we cannot continue this high level of proactive post-market surveillance for every product. So we need to have criteria, by which criteria we will decide that the product is now ready to be transitioned to our routine surveillance. That's what
So
I was
again, what you're just saying though, but does that fall into the post-market procedure? So the way I see it is in the plan, I refer to a post-market procedure, CAPA, CAPA, and any other post-market mechanisms, and I'm listing that for the collection and review of the information.
Yeah.
Is that's how I'm going to gather it. But in terms of the plan,
yeah,
I'm not writing anymore.
That's where I think that's where we fall short, because the post-market surveillance procedure is written for products across the board. You have a certain system in place.
No, I understand that, and the plan is that every product's going to have a post-market plan, surveillance plan, right? That's part of the EU MDR. That's a requirement now.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
So
a requirement.
So you're going to do that for your products typically.
Each product.
But I guess what I'm saying is, in the risk management plan, besides pointing to the other requirements, is there more that should be written out from a risk management perspective besides pointing to your post-market processes or mechanisms?
Yeah, I think that's what I was describing, Saurabh. So let me clarify. What I was saying is, you can rely on the post-market surveillance process, but you can create a dedicated document, a separate document for the plan for that specific product, outlining frequency, data sources, type of analysis, and criteria for transition. Now, this can be done within the overall framework of our PMS procedure. It can. But what you are saying is that for a certain period of time, this document will control the activities related to this product covered by this RMP. That's what I was trying to say.
Okay.
But there are many ways to do it. That's not the only way. Whatever works in your organization, maybe you have like only one or two products. Maybe you're not have a portfolio of products. In that case, keep it simple. You can put those criteria details in the RMP. But if you have like a big portfolio of mature products, semi-mature and brand new products, I think you might want to differentiate with a separate dedicated plan for each and make that as part of your, that's just one recommendation. But again, many different ways of doing it.
Yeah, we expect you to have a in 14971 a separate risk management plan for each product, and as a component of that plan is the post-market aspects. And one of the things we say in the standard is it can be part of another plan or whatever. So you could, in 14971 in the risk management plan, refer to the post-market surveillance plan for that individual product somewhere. It's not a requirement to repeat everything that you did in another document. We're not trying to create new work. We're just trying to make sure that the subject is covered somewhere. So if I can point to it in another document, that's fine.
I think that's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting at.
It needs to be focused on the product, so it's not a general document, but a product focus.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think what I want to finally emphasize, Saurabh, is sometimes we may forget the transition plan, because we would anticipate a brand new product to transition out of this extra surveillance in the first phase. So what are the criteria? By which criteria we're going to decide? Is it time-based? Is it, some other criteria? What analysis? And we forget, like, we should not apply the same statistical approach that we apply for other routine products, other routine data, to a product which may not have enough amount of data. Maybe a different statistical analysis needs to be performed. So the more detail you can provide, the higher will be the chance of success of that particular plan. But how you do it, how you execute it depends on the organization, right?
Especially for high risk products, you don't want to have a time-based plan. Okay, you want to have something that is based upon what's actually happening, and a time-based thing just doesn't cover all the requirements.
Yeah, well, so because eventually, Ed, to emphasize your point, it should link to benefit risk.
Yes.
Right? If our benefit risk continues to be kind of questionable or low level of certainty, amount of uncertainty is high, we need to continue gathering that. Shalu, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
I just, like Ed was mentioning, I agree. That's what we also did for one of the high risk products when doing our remediations. It was an old product, of course, under MDD, but then we were remediating it. So usually it was very fine, this time-based frequency, 1 year or 6 monthly, but then we included something more stricter for this product, especially in the risk management plan itself, that besides your regular post-market surveillance, you will do a literature search, kind of SOTA, which you do for clinical evaluation. So what we did was to include it even to see the risks or the failure modes for the similar devices. You search mode or other things, that we included that because it's a high risk device. So it was a good decision that you really see the indications or signals even from similar devices, and you can foresee or try to think whether you can have these failure modes or risks. That is one thing we did. And the second thing which can be very helpful to include is that you don't even do it only when there is a PMS report available, but make some kind of version when, if you really have a serious complaint, even if it's not the time for regular update, but if you have to issue a field safety notice or a record, something of this kind, which leads to a design change. It's a real example because one of our complaints within 6 months of release of product ended up issuing a field safety notice. Even if your PMS was 6 months away, the report and the regular update, but then immediately it triggered all the updates and the inclusion and all mitigations and control measures, because it ended up in a kappa, which resulted in a design change of the product.
So then it should be linked to your
risk management plan. Means we included in risk management plan kind of section that besides your regular PMS signals, you look for the signals from literature's continuous review of literature, review of scientific literature. That's the term we used. And it was quite appreciated by the notified bodies as well, that you search for signals from similar devices, and you always take immediate action if your product you receive a complaint which results into any kappa.
Yeah, don't wait for a review, right?
Yeah, don't wait for the review or a normal periodicity of your PMS reports. Maybe
so, Christian, you are sharing something. Can you please go ahead and share that with the entire group?
Yeah, I am not an expert in post-market surveillance, so I use this ISO to help to write my
yes,
my procedure.
Yeah, there is a document out there that she's referring to that is an excellent reference on post-market surveillance, and there is a diagram, a figure 1, which connects together post-market surveillance process 1345 and 14971, and talks about requirements and deliverables. And it's a good, useful document on post-market surveillance from the ISO perspective. It's not written as an EN document, but and it's written as a technical report, a guidance, not a standard.
What's the reference on that, Ed? We couldn't see it on your screen.
Yeah, I know. I tried to show it, but my background covered it up.
Yeah.
It's ISO TR technical report 20416, and it was released last year. So it's a 2020 document. And I'm
Yes,
glad she
yes, I
brought
got
this
this.
up because
I got
it's a
this.
very good reference document.
Right? This is the one you guys are talking
Yep,
about?
that's it. That's it.
So great. I think great tip for all of us to get a copy of this and try to, and I know it has a lot of good examples. Actually, it talks about techniques for data analysis. So yes, this can be a very good resource.
And I want to point you back to that one I referred to much earlier, is the GHTF CAPA guidance. It's been around a long time, but it's what 1345 and 14971 both based our post-market requirements on. And as a result, it kind of sneaks in behind the scenes into 20416.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Christian. You had some other question or comment.
I would say that we can also have to ask for the distributors and importers to give us information about the product. What we have done is to include in our agreement with them this clause asking them to provide the information about the product.
Absolutely. Yes, that's another source of data, right? The distributors. Yes. Shalu, you still have your hand up. Any other question, comment from you? Maybe not. Okay, so guys, again.
No, the hand just didn't go away.
No, go ahead.
Follow-up.
Okay, good. Good. No, go ahead, Bijan, please.
I have a follow-up question, Christian's question. So do you have to ask your distributor, because doesn't EU MDR require the distributors as economic operators also participate in it? So then don't they just have to do it automatically? Do we have to ask him?
No, what we have done is to include clause in our agreement just to make sure that they have the obligation to give us the information.
Okay, so it's like a belts and suspenders, because they're supposed to do it, I think, according, if they want to comply to EU MDR.
Yeah, but in the dental field, it's quite difficult to collect information from distributors and importers.
Okay.
But I can tell you, Christian, now they are doing it. I am in the dental industry, same. But they have to now comply. They have some grace period.
What I'm hearing you say, Christian, is that put it in writing. It's okay to be redundant.
It doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
It's better, I guess. It's safe.
Yes, guys. Again, so almost we talk for an hour, like we always do, and great discussion. But again, being respectful of your time. Again, the recording will be available to you, but I just want to highlight one key point. If you are not aware of the discussion forum that we have set up, please go check it out or let me know. And if you're already on it, appreciate if you continue to share your insights and questions, comments. We have several interesting threads going on right now. So, whenever you get a chance, pop in. But I can send you some information as well in terms of what's going on there and how to get on if you're already not on the discussion forum. But before I close, anybody has any question, comments, feedback, what we should be doing different, or how to make it work better?
I think it went really well, Naveen. Congratulations. I think you did a great job as usual. I think
yes,
starting with that warning letter was a really nice way of seeding the discussion.
Okay. Yeah. So what I'm looking for is if you have a question that you want to get answered in this forum, I want to make sure we cover it. But when I receive no questions, I just find what I find interesting. So I don't want to impose my kind of interest on you, but otherwise we'll be just sitting here and figuring out what to talk about. But I really suggest to you that if you have a question that you really want answered, and we have great people on this forum, as you can see, send it to me in advance. Either you put it during registration or send me an email, whatever works for you. But if you drop me that question, I usually start with those questions. But this time, of course, we didn't have any. So thank you, Bijan. And again, rest assured, even if I receive no questions, we will start with a topic that I think could be of interest, and then we'll build on that, because we are not going to follow a script on these discussions. Okay, so this might be a little bit uncomfortable for a lot of people. It's not a webinar where we stand up and give a slide presentation. No, on purpose, it is a discussion, and I hope it works for you, right? So
Yes.
anything else?
Hey,
Any
Naveen, I
other-
just wanted to mention
Go ahead,
that
Jed.
I wrote a series of articles on EU MDR and its interface with post-market and risk management.
Okay.
And it's available for free. And it has a lot of answers to some of the discussions we were having. It's on meddeviceonline.com.
Okay, Jed, if you don't mind, just send me the link to those articles. And what I have started thinking about, I mean, it's not in motion yet, is every month I'm going to send you guys sort of a newsletter. Okay, that newsletter will have these resources, links to those resources. And some of you have already signed up to that mailing list. We are just trying to put things in place right now, but that newsletter can contain all these resources, that report we talked about, Jed, the article references you are giving, Bejan, your book, Ed, your books, Shalu, anything you can point. So I will compile all this information and send it to you guys on a kind of monthly basis. Will that work?
Great.
Yes.
Great, yeah, great.
Because I
idea.
don't want to
Very helpful.
either, right? So go ahead. Yeah, so that's the link. I will definitely take care of that, Jay. Thank you for sharing that with us.
So that's just the link of one of them. Like you can see the rest of them through that. And also
Okay.
that website compiled it into an ebook. So if anybody wants all of them in a PDF format, you can get
Perfect.
that.
Sure. Absolutely. We will share that with the group. Any other last thoughts? No? All
Good
right, guys.
discussion.
Thank you, Ed. Good discussion. Thanks, everyone. It's all because of
Thank you.
you.
Thanks, Naveen.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Take
Naveen.
care, guys. Good one. Have enjoy
Thank you
the-
all. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
We'll
Bye-bye.
meet next month.